Here.
Alder DePula.
Here.
Alder Holmquist.
Here.
Alder Moore and Alder Woodard excused. Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the May 15th and 22nd minutes?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion minutes are approved. There are no appearances, but I do have two proclamations to read. First is a proclamation recognizing June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month. Whereas the first Pride March was held on June 28, 1970, on the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City, which was a tipping point for the gay liberation movement in the United States, and whereas since 1970, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer/questioning plus people have continued to gather in March in the month of June to demonstrate for equal rights, to recognize the impact that LGBTQ plus individuals have had on history locally, nationally, and internationally, and to remember members of the community who have been lost to hate crimes or HIV/AIDS. And whereas the City of Monona is committed to creating an environment that is welcoming to all peoples, regardless of their race, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, or ability, and whereas the City of Monona strives to be a place that is comfortable and enjoyable for any person to live, where all people are treated and perceive they are treated fairly and respectfully, where participation in civic life is open to all, and all people perceive their contributions are valued, and where the values of all groups, including those who have too often been left behind and left out, are reflected, and whereas the City of Monona strives to foster a sense of belonging and opportunity across our community, and to remove barriers to living, working, and thriving in our city, because we believe that diverse perspectives make Monona a great place to visit and call home, and whereas the City of Monona appreciates the cultural, civic, and economic contributions of the LGBTQ plus community, which strengthen our social welfare, and finds it imperative that all people in our community, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders. Now therefore I, Mayor Mary Kay O'Connor, Mayor of the City of Monona, Dane County, Wisconsin, do hereby declare the month of June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in the City of Monona, and urge residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ plus community, and to actively promote the principles of equality, liberty, and justice. Signed in the City of Monona, Dane County, Wisconsin, this 5th day of June, 2023. Mary Kay O'Connor, Mayor. And then we have a proclamation recognizing June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth. Whereas Juneteenth became a federal holiday in 2021 when President Joe Biden signed into law the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act to recognize the emancipation of enslaved African Americans, and whereas while the Emancipation Proclamation signed by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863 officially freed the slaves, it took more than 2.5 years for word of the proclamation to reach authorities in the South. Juneteenth is symbolically celebrated to commemorate June 19, 1865, when Union Army troops marched into Galveston to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation and free enslaved Americans in Texas, and whereas early Juneteenth celebrations were called Jubilees and included political rallies which gave instructions on how to vote to the newly freed Americans. Today's Juneteenth celebrations still often include voter registration efforts, along with lectures, stories, and plays on African American culture and heritage. Picnics and family gatherings with barbecue and red-colored foods like red velvet cake and strawberry soda represent resilience and joy. And whereas it is important to continue a dialogue of the realization of what Juneteenth historically means to all Americans in order to promote racial healing, reconciliation, restoration, and justice. Now therefore I, Mary O'Connor, Mayor of Monona, Wisconsin, in collaboration with the Monona City Council, do hereby declare June 19, 2023 as Juneteenth in the City of Monona, and call on residents to celebrate the power and resilience of Black Americans and commit to continue our work to end systemic inequity wherever it exists. Signed in the City of Monona, Dane County, Wisconsin, this 5th day of June 2023. Mary Kay O'Connor, Mayor. And to that, I would just add that the library, the celebration of Juneteenth in Monona this year will be held at the library, and there should be information posted soon about that, but I know it's involving a new story walk, and a few people will be speaking on the 19th. I'm not quite sure about the time yet, so. All right, there is no public hearing. Consent agenda. Is there a motion, Alder Holmquist?
I move that we remove 5I and 7E from the consent agenda.
Okay, is there
I'll
a
second
second?
that. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Would,
And then,
does that require explanation for those listening or watching or not?
if you'd like to,
Sure. Those items are being requested to be removed because there is an alder connected to those items, and
Right.
allow them to decide if they're going to abstain when we vote specifically on those items.
Thank you.
okay. Is there a motion to approve these consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Alder Holmquist, were you going to?
Yeah, I'll move approval of item 5I and 7E.
Second.
Is all in favor, say aye.
Hang on.
And I need to be noted as abstaining.
Okay. So Alder DePula is abstaining, and all in favor, everyone else approved, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
And Rick, you voted, right?
Yes.
Okay. Motion is approved. A little kludgy, but we did. So,
But thank you.
Yeah,
For that
thanks for-
transparency. That's
yeah.
very good.
Moving on to council action items, there is no unfinished business. Under new business, item 2A, and this is started for immediate approval, is consideration of resolution 23-2624, approval to submit 2022 compliance maintenance annual report, CMAR review and recommendations put forth by the Public Works Director. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
I'll move to take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Dan.
Thank you, Mayor. What's in front of you tonight is the annual CMAR report. It's the report card of our operations and maintenance of the sanitary sewer system. The DNR requires us to present the CMAR to our city leaders every year, so they are aware of the operations and maintenance and financial responsibility of the upkeep of our sanitary sewer system, and for those communities that have wastewater treatment plants. It's their way to ensure we don't fall behind in disrepair and the operation. As you can see throughout the report, it's pretty typical for Monona to get our grades of an A, because we're a small system and we're a collection system only. We don't have a wastewater treatment plant to maintain. The report covers the amount that we have spent in the maintenance of our lift stations, and we have an equipment replacement account in our operating budget for the sewer utility that the hard costs go to as far as being funded by. By that I mean if we have to replace a pump, an impeller, things like that, routine maintenance is not part of that cost. That comes out of the regular operations budget in our sewer utility. It also covers the kilowatt hours consumed at the lift stations and also the therms of natural gas used. We were up slightly last year because of the several operations of our emergency generators with the storms that came through. So we had more natural gas use at the lift stations that have the backup generators. One thing I'd like to point out to you is that along with this report card with the maintenance and operation of the sanitary sewer system, for those that have been on council for a while, you might be aware that we've been trying to tackle our inflow and infiltration issue of our collection system. In 2019, that was our worst year for I&I. Roughly 52% of our flow that we sent to MMSD was clear water. I&I would be any groundwater that comes in the system, any sump pump discharges, any leaks in internal residential plumbing that let's say if you have a faulty valve in your toilet tank, that water just cycles through, that's clear water. So the goal there is to try and reduce the amount of clear water in the system. And I'm happy to report that 2019 was our highest year, with 52.41% of our flow being clear water, down to 4% last year. 4%. So we decreased our flows to MMSD by over 50%, simply because we had a major, three major projects where we did lining in our sewer system, about a mile each. The main one was the Industrial Drive Interceptor project that we joined with the City of Madison on. So with those three projects, also our water meter upgrade in 2021, residents have the ability to sign up for leak alerts with their water meter. So if they have a faulty toilet, they can be made aware of that through an alert on their cell phone or on their computer. So with the sump pump inspections, we eliminated, I think, over about 10 to 12 illegal discharges or illegal connections to the system. We've helped residents reduce the amount of clean water flow from their homes. And of course, the three projects with the sanitary sewer lining. So on average, our water that we pump from the aquifer is about 605,000 gallons a day. In 2019, we were sending 1.3 million gallons to MMSD a day. We have that down to 631,000 on average from last year. So that's a success. And I'd like to point out that we spent roughly, on the last two lining projects, about 185,000 each. We made that back already on each project in our sanitary sewer operating budget. So that's a victory, and I think that's a victory for City Council for approving those funds, that we can do those projects and bring that I&I back down to a normal range. So anyways, I'm seeking your approval of the CMAR report as a requirement of the DNR, and then I will submit the resolution to the DNR tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank
thanks, Dan. And as I said to Dan when he was telling me these numbers earlier, this is a sustainability thing to promote, right?
Absolutely.
So it's great.
Like
Um,
ratings.
Good move that the council decided to do this a few years ago.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions for Dan? Comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And good work.
Yeah.
We are going to move item B down to the end. Originally, we thought Bill would be here earlier in the meeting, but he has another meeting he has to be at, so we'll move that to later when he's hoping to be here. So we'll move on to item C, consideration of resolution 23-6-2625, a resolution to approve purchase of a 2025 Pierce engine put forth by the police chief. Chief? I'm sorry, the fire chief. You're not buying the Pierce engine, no.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, I explained to finance earlier, this is the culmination of about a year of work from our apparatus committee. I sent out several documents as part of this, which included the replacement schedule. Engine 4 is the replacement that's currently being discussed. It is a 2004 Pierce engine. So I tasked our apparatus committee, which is mostly volunteers and one or two full-time members, to come up with what the needs of the department were, as opposed to just replacing an engine and say, let's look at it and see what we actually need, as opposed to what we've always done in the past. So they've worked over a year on this. Again, probably 800 or more hours volunteered going through pages of specs and piece by piece, many times over sometimes. And they came back with a recommendation for purchase of a 2025 Pierce on a commercial chassis. The the reason it's before you tonight is for us to receive that fire engine by November of 2025. It has to be ordered in the next month. Otherwise, we will not get it in 2025. So the only variable on this is the discrete price of this engine is $643,000 and change, $644,000. That's if it's paid in full at the time of delivery. If the city chooses, they can prepay it any time between when the contract's signed and pickup, and it'll be a prorated amount that they take off based on the number of months that it's prepaid. Within this contract, the only price change that will occur will be if there's a change in the chassis price. Pierce doesn't control chassis pricing. They're very upfront that if there is a change in pricing, which will always be an increase, as they said, there's never been a decrease in pricing, it's always an increase. That is the only volatility in this, is the chassis pricing between when we place the contract and when they place the order for the actual chassis. So if there's a price increase in that period of time, that would be added on to the price. Typically, they're looking at about a 5% increase annually. So it depends on when they order that chassis as opposed to when their price increases occur. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about this engine.
I guess just before we start, just for the benefit of Alder Bernstein, this is something that has developed since COVID, where it's getting more and more difficult to order these vehicles. Typically, we would approve this and as part of the 24 budget discussions for 25, and then we'd order it in 25, and it might arrive early 26 or something. But now these companies are starting to require that we order them a year or two in advance, which commits us to spending the money, and we're planning on ordering it anyway, but it does.
Yeah, typically a
recap
build
ahead
is
of
about
time.
6 to 8 months is the typical build time for an engine. So that they'll order the chassis with that time frame in mind. They're still clearing the backlog, and it's not just Pierce, it's all manufacturers trying to clear the backlog from the pandemic. So their ability to provide the truck has been extended out based on the pandemic.
So if we don't get our order in now, we may end up not seeing a truck till 2027 or
Yeah.
whatever. So. Any questions from anybody? Teresa?
Just a clarification, this budget item has already been approved.
No.
We're just.
No.
It was part of the capital improvement plan for 2025, but that, we actually only approved the actual items for the upcoming year. So but it's been in the.
It's been in the
plan.
improvement plan, yes.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Because these fire trucks, typically, engines have to be replaced every 20 years,
Yeah.
you're saying?
So yeah, legally, you only can approve 1 year worth of budget, so we have a 5-year plan. According to Bill Cole today, so we can't really bind on a future council. So if, 24 or 25, they can say they don't want to pay for it. So that is an issue that we're going to be working out here in the future, because you can't really, according to Bill, you can't really bind a future council on expenditures like this. So that will be an issue that when the new administrator starts, we're going to have to figure out. And Bill has some ideas, so I think we're going to sit down once the new administrator starts and kind of figure out what our game plan is, because this is starting to happen more often. I mean, we've already had Public Works, we've already had Parks come here,
I think fire also has.
Yeah.
ordered a few
Yeah.
things.
fire and police, so it is an issue. We just have to, one of those things we have to figure out, and we will, once we get the administrator in here and kind of work out a good game plan with the attorney who's,
I think we have to hope that over time, this situation shakes out. and
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're back to somewhat of a more normal schedule.
Pre-pandemic schedule,
But,
yeah.
right, it could be 4 or 5 years. So basically, we have to place the order, we don't have to pay anything, but it has to be placed by July 1st.
So what exactly are we voting on now?
We're voting to approve placing the order.
Placing the order, which doesn't commit a future council?
well, technically, they could say they don't want
They can revoke our
to revoke
approval.
it, yeah,
Okay.
which would probably,
Wasn't there one of these we were discussing this morning that you can revoke the approval without any problem? Was that the police?
police would be the easy.
If you don't raise your debt ceiling, then you don't pay what you said you were going to buy, right?
Jerry's a little
Isn't that
more
how it
unique because
works?
it's a custom job. So,
Yeah.
but like for a police car,
It's
technically.
a standard design.
Yeah.
So we're not just, this isn't just a first read, this is like,
This is a first read.
oh,
Yes, it can go through a full second read.
okay.
Yeah, so we're bringing it to you now if you have any questions, any.
I
information
really
you'd
pushed
like
my
for the
apparatus
chief.
committee to finish their job so we could have the opportunity to have 2 reads. And if anybody in the upcoming 2 weeks really wants to look at the 600 or so pages in the spec, you're welcome to stop down. I'm happy to show it to you. It's literally by part. So,
We did approve this as the Public Safety Committee, correct?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, typically it doesn't come to council until it's been approved by the committee, or sometimes it'll come for a first read, but council doesn't approve it for second read unless, sometimes it has to go back to the committee in between, depending on timing, but.
And this truck is replacing one of our existing trucks?
the Monona Engine 4, yes.
Okay. And is it pretty much just like a straight swap, like,
It's actually going to be
Similar-
slightly shorter, slightly less long,
More agile.
and using a commercial chassis as opposed to a custom chassis.
oh, nice.
From a maintenance and reliability standpoint. Parts are in short supply for custom chassis.
And then what happens to the outgoing truck?
They generally get sold at auction.
Okay.
It's 20 years old.
Right. So typically, and I had kind of forgotten about this admittedly, we have 2 engines and we, try to we just replaced one like
In
2017.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah. And then this is the next one up. So it should be quite a while,
Yeah.
hopefully. Until,
The next big truck that's on the replacement schedule is the ladder in 2032.
and that'll be a discussion the council's going to have if they want to replace the ladder. So, but that's a long time.
That's
So-
a future council, so.
Any other questions about this particular purchase? It'll come back in 2 weeks. If you have more questions, or contact the chief in the meantime if there's any.
I think Brian has a
Brian?
question.
My only question is, so prepayment, if we do the prepayment early, it would be down to 617?
Yeah, if it was prepaid at the time of contract signing, like August 1st. Excuse me. My easiest way that I can figure out, Jason from Reliant has this whole complex formula. It's basically $1,000 per month.
That it goes
So
up.
that it'll
Interest or
reduce.
something.
So it's like, because it's a 28-month build time, they can reduce the price by about $28,000. So basically, every month you wait, you add another $1,000 to that, $616,000.
So we don't have to pay it all in August.
Correct.
We can pay, if we
Yeah,
wanted
you
to
don't pay
prepay,
anything
we
in
could do
August.
it like a year from now, and we'd save
Correct. You'd still save 11 or
9,000
12,
or
whatever.
whatever.
they-
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah. If we do that in August, we'd have to have a budget amendment. So.
right, and that'd be,
Capital money.
we don't have that kind of money laying around.
In 23, no. But I say they did do a custom thing for if it was paid in April of 24, it would be 621,000, I think, or 623,000 with the prepayment. I just equated it to basically $1,000 a month. Every month after the contract signed, it's another $1,000 on the price.
So that'll be something we'll have to consider as part of the capital
Yeah.
budget discussion for next year. Anyone else? Okay, we will move on to the next similar item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
You-
Which is consideration of Resolution 23-6-2627, authorization to order a police vehicle for delivery in 2024. And this is also just on for first read.
Hello. So this is an item, the capital project plan that was previously approved by prior council. It's it's supposed to be a 2023 Ford F-150. And so I quickly, soon after the approval of that budget meeting, reached out to the state contractor for Ford and was told, sorry, you missed that window by several weeks. We don't have an idea as to exact timing of when that window will be open this year, but I am told that it will likely be before our budget process this year, later in the year, the final approval process. So I was never able to acquire that F-150 in its place. We got something else. I'm not sure when that SUV will be here, but it'll be an SUV, regular a squad car SUV. I'm told it's been ordered. This is, as I mentioned at Finance, we just received our second car from 2022 a week ago. So we're a bit behind as well in the production line and availability. As a reminder, the F-150, there's a purpose behind that, getting that vehicle, number one, the space is needed, the amount of bikes we pick up, the amount of debris on the belt line we pick up after hours, roadkill we pick up. We definitely need that pickup, the bed utility aspect of that pickup truck. And as reminded, I was reminded earlier in Finance, another important reason is an accommodation request for our larger officers who have to squeeze into our smaller SUVs. They're smaller in the sense that the new design, the cage and where you position the partition for the prisoner part of the car, only allows you to push that driver's seat so far back. And so there's not a lot of room for the officer. Ford did away with the adjustable pedals. And so really our officers are kind of cramped in there. And so that was an accommodation request made to me. I thought that was pretty reasonable. And heaven forbid if any of our larger officers get involved in a crash, it's not going to be good. So this was a all-around great option that I presented to council last year. Those on the council, I think, agreed. Well, you did because you authorized me to purchase one. And now I just need to get to the right window of opportunity to order one for 2024, which means I need your permission to order it sooner than later this year, once that window of opportunity is available.
So the only reason you have to come back is just because you're ordering it sooner.
Yes, I can.
But we all know that you're going to order it, and it's all
Or
approved.
you can tell me no.
Oh, but we already,
Well, we must have already approved you ordering the
Yeah.
SUV instead, right?
I
Yeah.
remember having this discussion about
Right.
the accommodation.
Right.
And, yeah.
So, but this, although it's part of the project.
It's really now 2024.
Correct. It's a
Right.
Because
24
we
item.
moved, we
So we're in
switched
a
up.
different budget set.
Right,
yeah.
he's approved to order,
Yeah.
he was approved to order it in '23, and
Well, we replaced it with the SUV, so now we have that.
the
in
SUV,
24.
we had been planning on buying in
Right.
'24.
So I can come back this time next year
Yeah.
and ask for permission again, or we can try to get this ordered during that narrow window this year to hopefully be delivered January 2 of 2024.
Yeah.
And you were still planning on ordering one other SUV. He'd originally planned on 2 for '24, instead ended up
Correct.
ordering one for this year and one for next year.
Correct.
Which will be in the budget that we,
Right. Yeah, I'll present that second vehicle at come budget conversation.
any questions?
And we're voting to allow you to move forward. This is not just a first read.
Yeah, this
I
is a
mean, it
first read
is, but
also.
it feels like, okay, all right,
Yeah, it's a first read, so we will be voting on this till next, 2 weeks from now.
all right, yeah.
So we're good?
I think we're well within, for example, Ford's not going to tell me tomorrow I have 2 days to order
Okay.
this thing. I think I'm comfortable enough, thank you for that consideration, to allow for a second, to allow
Yeah.
public time to
Yeah,
provide some input.
all right,
Thank you.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
yes.
All right. Well, the next item is the item we need to talk about with Attorney Cole, who's not, and I haven't gotten an email or a text.
Yeah,
from
we
him.
haven't yet. You had that one, you have one where-
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, we did have one other item. Item E, consideration of Resolution 23-6-2626, a resolution in support of Dane County's application for a U.S. DOT charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant.
It's online.
Put forth by myself and Alder Bernstein. Periodically, we get requests to send in letters of support for various grant requests, and quite often I just send them in, or the staff do. Alder Bernstein asked if this could come from the council. So is Brad still?
Brad's on the line.
Yeah, Brad, do you want to explain a little bit about this? Or first of all, I'm sorry, is there a motion to take this out of order?
Motion to take it out of order?
Second,
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, because this has to be in by a certain date.
Yep.
Can you ask if you can do it by Zoom?
Brad,
No.
Bill, okay.
Yeah.
Brad, are you,
Got the floor, Brad.
Is he still there?
He's there. I just
yeah,
see
okay.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
There's lots of Brad.
Oh.
No.
there we go.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you,
I
Brett.
mean, it must be those guys.
Yeah.
Hold up, Brad.
Can you
Try
say
now, Brad.
a little better, but
That's just coming from there.
oh.
It's coming up on my speakers and that, but not the speakers out here. Let me just try one more.
Just texted. I emailed me too.
Right now, ask them to.
Try it now, Brad.
And now they'll fix this. Okay, tell it one more time, sorry.
Okay, Brad.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right, perfect.
I knew something.
So the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change are putting in a fairly substantial grant application to the feds for around $14 million to patch in, and I say patch in, but strategically locate EV charging stations throughout the county, including in locations in Monona, Madison, all of the other metropolitan area cities, and then elsewhere throughout the county. So this grant application is to help in terms of in an equitable way put these in places where populations of need would use them. So that's at least how they sold it to us. But either way, we would be supporting that effort by putting in this letter of support. So it's not uncommon, and the county has done it for the city of Monona in the past for different stormwater grants and stuff like that. So
Anybody have any questions for Brad?
Do you know what the timeline on this might be in terms of when we might hear the grant's been approved?
usually is a pretty slow process with federal grants. I would assume somewhere towards the end of the year
Okay, thank
for
you.
something like this.
Still
Is it
worth.
due tomorrow? Is that the?
They're looking to get the letters of support by the end of this week,
Mm.
and then they'll submit their entire grant package at that point in time.
I'm sorry, Rick. Did you have another question?
Nope. Okay.
Okay, that's okay. Anybody else have any other questions for Brad? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Let's see if I have not heard back from Bill, so I think we will just start this discussion without him. Moving up to item B, consideration of ordinance 6-23-766, amending section 367-1 of the Code of Ordinances relating to short-term rental properties and establishing a fee put forth by myself. Just as a little introduction to this, as you know, we passed the ordinance several months ago. Staff has been working on how to implement it. As part of that, we did, and I sat in on this meeting, met with the company that makes this software that Madison uses, and it's kind of amazing what it can do, and it's not very expensive. It's like $5,000 or something. So we've signed a contract for it. I think we don't have it yet. But just in talking with them and in Madison about, and staff taking a closer look at what was passed in the ordinance, there are a few pieces in that ordinance that are just really difficult for us to enforce. So we think Bill put together a red line suggesting a few changes, and in fact, there's an additional change that wasn't in your packet we just heard about later, but
We were
late
hoping
this
Bill was
afternoon,
gonna
but
be
we'll include it next time.
Sure.
So do you want to just go through these?
Yes.
Whoever.
Yeah, we can.
Go ahead. We can take team in here.
Yeah. So as mentioned, the edits that are put forward here really pertain to sort of the application and the enforcement of this ordinance. We've met internally as staff and just looked at this in conjunction with the software and sort of comparable ordinances just to think how this could be enforced, the sort of standards and the applicability of the ordinance moving forward. So the changes are really sort of with that in mind. So kind of working through the documents and the red line, the first would be the requirement that it's the permit must be pulled before even the property is advertised. And the reason for that is that the way the software works, it's sort of scouring multiple different databases, different websites for listings. As soon as the property is listed in one of those, it will sort of come up, there'll be a notification, and we'll be able to identify that. And so if they haven't pulled a permit, then it's pretty straightforward enforcement. There's no monitoring of dates or anything like that. If it's on the website without a permit, they're in violation, and we can immediately reach out and start working with them on that.
With that one was when we worked with Madison, or talked with Madison about, that's their number one thing they able to enforce their ordinance, is having that. They have to advertise, because then they could, they have the data right over there, they haven't filled a permit, and so they can go after them. So that's their number one thing.
Black and white.
And sort of in conjunction with that, and you'll see these are the other the strike-throughs on the first page of the ordinance would be the removal of the 15-day element. Sort of couple elements here and reasons for this. One of the main things from my perspective was making sure that we have the information immediately of the applicant. So who is renting this? What is their email, phone number? Who may be the property manager? Any of those types of things, we have that information on file, which I think would be of benefit to neighbors, to the city, just from any sort of communication that may be needed. And so it will feed into a fee element a little further down the line. But the reason for that was just, again, enforcement of that. How do we prove that out sort of off the bat? A lot of people may just say, we're just using it for 15 days or less, and sort of look to skirt the rules that way. So this way, it requires people be on the books. We have the materials we need, and we will discuss the fee element to that in a little bit. The next change, sort of skipping through onto the third page of the draft ordinance, would be sort of to subsection F here, and some of the tweaks regarding the duration of the stay, and effectively the period in which that it may be marketed. And so this sort of follows standards that we've seen elsewhere, sort of locally, but also within the state as well, requiring the 180-day period of operation within a 365-day rolling period. And so one way that the city discussed this internally as sort of offering more flexibility to applicants would be that can be divided into 30-day sections, either starting on the 1st or the 15th of the month, allowing for them to sort of elect, let's say, they don't just want it during the summer, spring-summer season, for example, they want some in the holidays or something like that. On the application form, they can choose to do that and to sort of have that stipulated. So, of course, the 180 days would be, under half of the available days to market this, and would still, internally in our discussion, it was intended that this would still provide relief for neighbors, would still, sort of offer that quieter time where that wouldn't be available for rental. And I should say this is available. It's unlikely that it would be rented every single day during that period. But this was seen as a way to provide some flexibility to the owners, to the applicants, but also giving some relief to neighbors, just from the some of the feedback we've heard of the challenges that may come with some of these. So I did look. I'd been requested to look at sort of some of the other communities and what they were doing. Just for reference, a lot of these sort of select that it be 180 days continuous, and so the city offering those 30-day time periods, it does offer more flexibility than we would see. Either, I think, City of Madison, Verona, and Waunakee all require sort of continuous 180 days. And so that number is very typical, but just the application and sort of the implementation of it is a little different as proposed here.
And plus, the part of the enforcement, this is more also an enforcement issue. So say they pick the month of May, and in June they didn't pick that month, and all of a sudden we see in the system there's a ping that they listed. We know right away they're in violation of their permit, so we're able to follow up with that. Otherwise, if it's 100 days throughout the year, it's almost enforceable, we thought, with our
For
current
us to try
system.
to track that for 46 different residences would be impossible. I mean,
Who actually does the enforcement?
It will be our code enforcement
Okay.
officer, John.
So the owner must, so in summary, the owner can have short-term renters at any time of the year, as long as the total number of days is no more than 180.
No.
No.
That's what it was originally. If an owner is living in the property,
yes.
then they can do
Yes.
whatever. But this is for properties
Right.
where the owner's not
Off-site.
living there, and that's most of our properties, right? Someone bought them just for this purpose. They're not living there themselves.
So I think to answer.
So what's a different way to say what I just said? What was the flaw in the sentence that I?
So I think you had said at any point during the year.
No, as long as it doesn't, as long as the total days don't exceed 180. But that's not even, okay.
So they would have 6 lots of 30 days that they could allocate throughout the
Okay.
year, which they could do every other month, sort of spread it
Okay.
throughout the year. They could also just do 180 continuous. So there could be a time where there's, it's in January, it's in the summer, and it's in December. But that would all sort of be elected at the start of the year on the application form. And this, you can see from the red line is sort of in place of that 7-day, one person every 7 days. Again, the intent here, I think, was to provide some relief to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think it had been brought up in previous discussions. But again, sort of from identifying cars and some of those things that may be a little more difficult to identify. This is a little more straightforward, as Mark mentioned, in terms of the bookings and
Right.
months when it's supposed to be dark. If we see that it is being listed, if it is available, it's a little bit more straightforward to.
I was just imagining needing to explain it to someone else.
Yeah,
So give me a 2-sentence explanation. You get six lots of 30 days. Done. You
And they can mix them up any way they
any
want.
any 6 packages of the year, they cannot exceed 30 days. If you have renters every single 30 days, that's okay. If you have one renter, that's all you get. You've used up your lot.
I think the only difference is if you're renting like a portion of your house and you're living in it, correct, then there isn't the 180-day
I
restriction.
believe so. This would be the owner is off-site.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think was the software thought there's only less than one, I think it was less than,
1%.
it was like basically one house.
Yes,
That was owner-occupied, yeah.
that's correct.
It
Yeah,
was one out of the 46.
Yeah.
yeah, 98% are entire homes. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, Doug, did you see the change for the other one we discussed that I sent Bill the question about last night?
Yes, I have it pulled up here.
It was H, I think.
I'm going to pull up his email. So there was a revised red line. The city cannot limit to 30 days if they're renting for a period of 6 to 29. We can still limit them for stays of 6 days or less. And so those changes are reflected in the revised red line that would be a part of the second read.
But I think this is the change where, I was just reading through this last night and
Where are
realized
you at
we're
in
on
the-
under H. It was the old H.
If
It's
an
been-
operator who is operating an STR pursuant to
Does not
okay.
occupy the residence, they may operate no more than 30 days per permitting year. Well,
No.
it's against the law for us to say that.
Yeah, right.
We have to let them operate 180 days a year. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to strike that, but Bill
Sure.
He hasn't actually come through with the red line.
Got
about
it,
that,
okay.
right? Or at least the copy I did that he sent today didn't have a red line that I saw.
We had one just before 6 p.m. this
Yeah,
evening.
okay.
But, so I think we've got some changes, but yeah, I certainly imagine this will be part of the next packet.
So yeah, I think that's the only thing that wasn't included in tonight's packet, because we
Yeah.
just talked about it, so.
And so I would say the main other element here is the permit fees, and so that's under sub 10. And this sort of gets to the point that everybody must apply for a permit as well. It does allow for those that rented for less than 15 days per year, 15 days per year, that you can get a refund of 50% of permit fees. So it's sort of on the applicant to prove that and to show that through sort of a guest book or something like that. But again, in the spirit of what was previously included within the ordinance, the recognition here was that the work, the software, the staff time, the review, those things are all still there, and sort of having that as the initial application fee is important. But if it is 15 days or less, you would suspect that it would be less burdensome to staff. Doing that, refund at the end of the year seemed like a good way to go.
When you say, the onus is on the permit holder to prove that they only had, they only rented it a very small number of times. What did you say?
Less than 15.
Less than 15 days, okay. And as one method of proving that, you mentioned a guest book. Do you really mean like a paper book? Or do you mean a digital book on a website?
So it's included in new sub M for
Right.
mother. It includes a requirement that they do need to have an STR report. And we actually had a digital format included here as well, so it wouldn't just be a traditional guest book
Yeah,
with
'cause that
comments
would-
and things. It
right.
would be a little more functional.
So it'll be an aspect of the reservation process where the person wishing to stay would have to submit the number of people that will be staying there. Right?
They would include that, and then the applicant, the operator of the
Yeah,
Airbnb
operator.
or of the short-term rental would sort of capture that in this
Yes,
information
yes.
for
Okay.
quarterly reporting.
Wonderful.
Any other questions? Or did you want to talk about the fee, or have we, or?
If I can, just on
Yeah,
that
and
one.
then we can take questions.
So on the guest book as well, just with the software that we have that we'll be using, it is able to give estimates based on dates that are blocked off and things like that. So we'll be able to have a rough estimate in terms of, does it look reasonable? Does it look like 150 days
Yeah.
are blocked off and they're applying for a rebate? So we'll be able to address some of those things, but the guest book will give us some additional information.
One last thing. But it's also, if there's issues and they get revoked or something like that, we have in there that goes to license review board to kind of oversee that process.
And so, in terms of the fee, when we had the training and sort of the informational meeting with the software provider, they were able to provide us some metrics in terms of the cost and the value of the nights that are being marketed at this point. And the median nightly rate in the city is just over $250 at $257. They said typically the application fee is typically 3 times the median nightly rate. So it's just over $250, and so that was where the $750 application fee came from. And so as part of that, and then this is again modeling on sort of adjacent communities, there would be of course the software, the code enforcement officer, and sort of the time and resources going to that, but also the building inspector will need to go through each of these properties, sort of from a building safety aspect, as well as the fire chief or a designee of him that would also go through this and look at it for fire and sort of emergency access points and things like that. So certainly recognizing that that number could be adjusted depending on workload and things like that moving forward. But just sort of estimating that both on the metrics from the 250, but also from the required staff time, 750 seemed like a reasonable amount.
So questions, anyone? Brian?
I'm thoroughly confused. I'll start there, just in case my questions make no sense.
I'll ask my questions even though I think I know some of the answers, but I'm not positive anymore. The picking the months. I think we have two groups, right? We have the people that own their home and they might live in their home. And that group may or may not be in their home when someone rents it. And then we have a group that someone owns the home, but they don't live there at all. The first one of the 180 days, and we're picking months to identify, even though I don't understand that, that applies to all three groups?
It doesn't apply to people who are living in the house and renting a room, right? They can
Correct.
rent as much as they want.
Correct.
But there's only one
If
of
they're
those that
home
we
the
know
day
of.
that it's rented.
Right.
Yeah.
There's only one.
No, they don't have to be home. They don't have to be there while the guests are
It
there.
has to be their residence.
It has to be their primary residence. So Brian,
Yeah,
if
that's
I,
a good point.
if I buy a house and I live in Texas, but I buy a house in Monona, I can arrange it with someone at Monona City Hall. I get to pick 6 blocks of 30 days throughout the year. And each block starts on the 1st or the 15th of each month, right? I can pick January, February, September, like whatever, right? And so then the city knows when to expect your software to fire off an alert. If the alert goes off and it's a month that I have not designated, I'm in violation.
But that doesn't address cases where people are occupying their residence.
But
They're living in it and renting it, does it? Because I think
it
that's,
doesn't apply.
if we look under item H, the new item H, that's one, if an operator who is operating an STR pursuant to sub FG above, which is, it's their primary residence, occupies the residence at the time of rental, there is no limit to the number of days the STR may operate.
Right.
And I'm comparing with the revised version from Bill as well.
Yeah.
And that reads the same. So that's how I see it, that there is no limit to the number of days if the operator operating the STR occupies the residence at the time of rental.
So I guess if they had
So
a
there are
house.
3 groups.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's primary residence and I'm there when my guests are there.
Yeah,
And it's,
Primary residence, I may or may not be there when the guests
I
are
rent
there.
it half the year or something.
And then it's not my primary residence, it's a hotel, right?
Yeah.
And so owners that either it's a primary resident or not, and they're not there when it's being rented, are limited to 180 days, and they got to pick in advance by month chunks of time.
correct.
Okay, I understand that, I think. Doesn't mean I agree with it, but I understand it. And if I read it correct, we eliminated the possibility of anybody 15 days or fewer to not have to comply with the permit process.
Correct.
So that's like out.
Correct.
I
But they can
understand.
get half their feedback.
Right.
If they prove
If
that.
If they prove that they've
only
only did that small number, they can get half the feedback.
When they renew it, yes. They get a 50% discount.
Sure, we've eliminated the possibility of not having to have a permit
Right,
Right,
for 15 days or fewer.
right,
yep.
right.
Because it's too
Oh, I understand
enforceable.
why,
Yeah.
And
I think we all understand the why of all of this. It's just the details of how the new ordinance reads, yeah.
And then no more is it one rental in any 7-day period of time.
That's gone,
It's gone.
that's gone.
That's gone because of the 180-day blocks, right?
Correct.
It's difficult to enforce, it's gone.
Well, Bill says he's joining now.
So some of the, so thank you. I think I understand where we're at. I think one of the concerns that we had with the more than one occupant in the 7-day
Right.
had to do with the rapid turnover, or
Right.
the concern of a rapid turnover. This wouldn't now address that issue. And then the second item of the person that wants to rent it twice, it's either being there or not being there, it eliminates the possibility of doing that without shelling out $750 or maybe half of that.
Right.
And if you're going to rent it and not be there for the night, or it's not your primary, you have to pick in advance 6-month chunks.
That's my understanding, yes.
That's primarily with the thought, though, that you'd be leaving town for like 3 months to go to Florida, and and while you're gone, you make it a short-term rental. It's not, if you actually live in the residence all the time, and you're going to go away for the weekend, and you've rented it to 2 people for those 2 days, right? Is that right,
Oh.
Doug? I mean, we're not saying you absolutely have to be,
No.
it has to be your residence that you're currently living in, but you don't have to be in
It says you got to
the-
be there at the time of the rental.
Yeah, that shouldn't be, I mean, we should be tying this to like, your primary residence is where you're registered to vote, is your primary residence. You know.
Right, but what we're saying is if it's your resident, there is one person who rents rooms in her house as short-term rentals and lives there all the time.
Yeah.
So that would be the person who's living there all the time. But then if she were to say, go to Florida for 3 months during the year and still make that room available, or maybe her whole house, then she'd be limited by the 180-day thing. Is that right, Doug? Am I thinking that right?
Well, I hear the Bill's joining. I do want to
Yeah.
get some clarification on this. We have language in here between the 1 to 6 days and 7+, which I think is to your point.
Yeah, I think.
Which I believe there is still some nuance there to that would preclude some of this turnover of residents. So I'm just trying to.
It just feels like maybe there needs to be another proofread of the document with,
I think Bill will come on, he can explain.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why
I
we
just get
not copy
I
that
just get the
as
feeling that some of the things were missed on the crossouts and, yeah.
He was coming.
He said he was getting on now, so there's a message.
Still doesn't allow.
Zoom not working, driving over, be there in 15 minutes.
Mayor, did you say that on page 83, number H was just gone? It was overlooked, it should be crossed out.
Right, yes.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
We just
yeah,
determined that like 2 hours ago.
yeah.
So should I tell him, okay, we can take a break, or? Bill's Zoom isn't working, so he's driving over.
Yeah, if you want.
Or do you have more questions that we can answer, and then when he gets here, we can?
I hope I have a simple question. How far in advance does a property manager who does not live at the residence, how far in advance do they have to declare which 6 blocks of 30 they will be renting?
I think we would expect that to be during the application process. So that would.
So 1 year in advance.
There would be some forward planning to that, yes. I think the thinking around this is there would be maybe certain times of the year, graduation or
Right.
holidays and things like that would be predetermined, that would be.
Yeah.
But that was the reasoning for that. And again, I think there was certainly internal discussion of, well, can they change it or can they make an adjustment? And then it becomes, ever more on staff again to sort of keep track of those dates. The 1st and the 15th were kind of put forward as some flexibility to that. It doesn't help with the timeline. I acknowledge that, but it at least helps if you're trying to rent from the 27th to the 3rd or something like that, that
Yeah.
you wouldn't use 2 of the months. That was part of that thinking there.
Any other questions while we wait for Mr. Cole?
So a person has to know a year in advance which 180 days they're going to rent out.
I would think that after maybe what we do is try to be flexible the first year that
Sure.
they're operating it, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I would think once you do it for a year, you're going to have
Yeah.
a pretty good idea of which time periods you'd like to make it available.
Yeah.
Like probably the middle of February to the end of March probably isn't going to be a big high demand time.
But right out the gate, your property is, your revenues are cut in half.
Well, except that we've said all along that they
Right.
can only do it 180
Right.
days
We
out of the year.
absolutely
It's
have.
just that we have no way to
Good point. That's a
And
very good point.
that's very
Yes.
enforce
typical.
that.
Yep,
other-
very typical. You're right. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. That's.
And we're a little
that's
more flexible than
Other
most other
communities.
places.
Yeah.
It's a straight 6 months
Yeah.
and that's it.
Correct. And with that, you basically, it's either the zoning administrator or the city clerk that you have to contact sort of the first day of the rental,
Yeah.
and that starts the clock.
So let's say I go down, I pick up my 6 blocks of 30. I can pick out 2 blocks of 30. It's just no more than 6.
Correct.
Yeah.
But let's say I pick 6, I just max out. And I pick from, January to, what, July? Is that 6? June?
End of June.
End of June? And I just pack it like every single day, rotating door for 6 months of the year. To Brian's point, that does not prevent that turnover that so many
That's
of the
true.
folks here spoke about.
Although I think most people aren't turning it over every day.
No, they're not, but every week. So are the 6 blocks of 30 that I have chosen, are those public record? Can the people living next to that property I'm renting out, can those neighbors go down to City Hall and sort of get a little heads up on
They could
when?
fill an open records request.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
would be able to do that, okay. Or I suppose they could just go on Airbnb. Could they just go on a website and punch in
But
the
you can't
address?
just punch in the address, so they don't tell you the address.
Okay.
But you can guess.
If you found the listing, I assume
You could make an
it should be
assumption.
blocked off
Yeah.
for those periods, yeah.
Okay.
Do we have an idea of how many people are operating short-term rentals right now?
Yep. So as of April of this year, the company that we're going to be going with had 46 unique
Okay.
rentals.
And we went into the meeting thinking there were about 30.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Which seems high,
so that's new information.
but 46 seems crazy high, right?
Well, they said, right, that there were, this time last year, there were 30, because they went back and checked, and then when they checked in April, it was up to 46. So that's like a 50% increase in 1 year. Because, in part, I think, because we don't have any rules.
Right, right.
Oh, so-
Everyone around us does until people.
Yeah. So there may be 50 by now. Who knows?
Sure.
Brian has a question.
Brian?
I might as well ask it now. Is there a reason that we just don't follow the Madison
That's what I was just saying too.
process? Like everything that we talked about wanting unique for a unique
We're going
situation
back on.
Right.
is no longer
Right.
like
Right.
I understand it. It's like it has implementation difficulties, and if that's the case, like
Right.
why are we trying to create?
Well, I
That's
think
already done.
we're just going with what we had and redlining it.
Absolutely,
Otherwise, it's
yeah.
throwing out what we had and starting over with the Madison ordinance. And I don't know if that has everything we want.
And I mean, that was generally sort of the template at least, so I haven't compared this to what was first, say presented. I think a lot of quite a few of these elements are dictated by state statute, so some of the time periods, durations, things like that are pretty standard across the board. I think I'm pretty open, the 30-day element, certainly open to that being a continuous period. I have the language from Madison that must run consecutively, and it begins the date of the first rental. And so you're sort of held to that let's say somebody wants to rent in February or something like that, that starts the clock, and maybe that addresses some of the operational challenges of picking the months. I think open to feedback on that. I think the intention, at least from a staff level, was some flexibility in recognizing different times of year have different benefits to folks, but that could be another way of just doing it.
I don't know where I completely land on this, but at the same time, if it starts that first day, you're given the incentive to turn it over quickly in the 180 days to make as much profit as you can.
Right.
Versus the idea of like, have the whole year, and the pressure isn't to rent it and flip it.
But we don't have any way of tracking it if we
Right,
just
that's
have the
the
whole year.
problem.
Unless we have somebody sitting out in front of each of these
No,
houses.
meaning like, why limit to 180 days?
Because we're trying to prevent people from being booked all the time, right? Isn't that
Right.
what you guys wanted?
Right.
Well,
In
well,
most
there's lots of things I wanted that
Well,
we
but
can't
most
do.
communities do limit it to 180 days.
Yeah, but if
I
it's-
think that's because it's the minimum we have to allow.
But if it's a
by
primary
state
residence,
law,
State
if it's
right?
primary residence,
And you
I
live
don't
there.
really care what they do. I mean, if it's if it's really their primary residence, it's where they're registered to vote,
Right.
it's
That
their
means they're
home.
living there 183 days or whatever.
Exactly. So
Right.
the things that I've cared about from the beginning the most is the companies that buy the house as an investment and then turn it into a hotel in a neighborhood, you know, and they're not there. So
Right.
just my 2 cents.
I think that was one of the questions that I think came up previously where, when Attorney Cole's here, like, the issue of can there be, how to separate out an owner occupied versus an off-premise owner, and can you really differentiate?
Yeah,
We can't discriminate, right, against companies that buy them as opposed to individuals
that's my understanding.
for that purpose.
Except we already have.
And Madison does.
Bill says we can't legally do that. Because didn't we talk about saying no LLCs could
I think that
originally?
there was at least.
But that's why we went to using terminology of primary residence.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's still the question that I think is outstanding for you,
Yeah.
in terms of the, you've left for a week, are you beholden to the 180 days? So we still owe you a response to that one, certainly.
I hope Bill's bringing snacks.
Actually, we've only been at this for an hour.
I know. I don't know why it seems like it's so long.
Yeah,
How close is it?
Well, he said he'd be 15 minutes. He's coming from Cottage Grove, so that's about right.
That's a long way.
I'm just curious by the 180-day frame. I understand it at one level, and at another I don't. Like, why would we want to encourage someone to turn it over to have the incentive to maximize every single day of the 180 rather than not be as focused on that? That's just tough
So are
to
you,
wrap my brain around.
is it the consecutive versus non-consecutive 180, or is it just 180?
Well, if you got to pick your months, like you're going to push every. If you got 30 days to rent,
Exactly.
you're going to start dropping the rates to just fill it.
Right.
You don't care who's there. And if it's filled on Friday, but they're not staying Friday and Saturday, you're going to do whatever you can to get a Saturday stay.
I would say, the thinking, two approaches to this. I think there's certainly the approach that you have, and the thinking of kind of maxing the days. I think the perspective we had was the 180 is the statute limit. That is, what others are doing, and sort of the fact that it's less than half of 365. So it's sort of that over half would be, would not be able to be rented, and there would be the perception of the relief, for the neighbors that it wouldn't be churning over or turning over with new renters during that time. So I think that was sort of the intention of that, and recognizing there are probably months that would be lower demand and things like that as well in the areas. So I can speak to that. I take the point about sort of the flip that could have, with folks looking to rent it out more frequently. But I think this sort of came from the 7-day element, and I think some of the challenges that may have had as well. With the rental period, policing it during that time, or renting it for the whole time, but folks not being there, just coming in for a game or something like that. So I think that this was seen as, in some ways, addressing that, I would say as well.
So you preferring the once every 7 days? Is that what you're thinking?
I think that helped address one of the possible concerns, but and maybe this was already answered in the jumbledness, and like I told you, I think I'm confused, but I'm not sure anymore. Is there still difficulty in implementing, saying 180 days? We don't care about 180 days, because when you file your report, it will tell us if you went over the 180 days. Like, why do we care if they declare the 6 month. If they have to give us their report anyways.
I would say a lot of it is sort of owing again to the enforcement of that the the records could easily show 180 or just under whether it is true or not, whereas the effectively going dark for 180 days, 185 would be a lot more easily tracked, I think, to show that. And I think the other part was the thinking of the consecutive, or at least in the 30-day chunks, would be that the sort of turning it on, turning it off, and just continually, starting and stopping the clock for the 180 days. Let's say there is a time limit, not just 365. That folks would, we'd constantly get emails or communications sort of saying, not renting it Tuesday to Thursday, renting it Friday, and just kind of the tracking of that again as well. So we have been talking about whether it's the guest book, whether it's a printout from one of the rental sites or something that sort of tracks those things. But how do we kind of mesh that with the reporting that we'll have, from the software, just to see if it's within the ballpark? And I think it's also fair to say, without having been through this, we don't honestly know the occupancy rates of these either. Whether it is typical to be just on weekends or 2 days a week or something throughout the year, and so to know that either, I think is still a little unknown to us at a staff level.
Because it's advertisement too, so even if it's the 6 month, they're going to still advertise year round.
They black out their calendar,
but it
right?
can only be available for the declared months,
Yeah.
as proposed here.
So if we see them, then we would find them.
Yeah, and it will be. I'll be curious to see or hear from Attorney Cole. I'm kind of pushed to say the 180 days you prove at the end of the year. I don't care what 100. I don't care. I think there's a lot of headache involved in the 6 month kind of picking and the desire to want to change. I mean, if the issue is, I don't know, I'd like to hear more.
There he is.
The man of the hour.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
How was golfing? No.
All eyes are on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You better do well, Cole.
We're only hung up on a couple of pieces, not everything. Right? And the 180-day thing, I think, is.
We rewrote the whole ordinance.
Yeah.
It's probably a good thing. So the 180 days, we are, as long as somebody rents more than 6 days and less than 30 days in those periods of time, we can't preclude them from renting for it. We have to give them at least 180 days to rent a season. If their rental period is less than 6 days, though, then we can preclude it outright if we wanted to. So we can condition rentals of less than 6 days to anything we want. Okay, it's that sort of period from 7 to 29 that is the sort of protected time. If they're renting, I guess in sort of simple terms, if they're renting longer term but not a whole month, they're protected. They get 180 days and we can't stop them. But if they're doing the sort of short 1 day, 2 day, up to 6 days, we can say you're not doing any of that at all if the council wanted to. So we would have the greater right includes the lesser right. So if we have the right to prohibit it altogether, we could condition it any way we wanted, if that makes sense.
But we've gotten rid of the 7-day thing with the 180 days. I think that's what.
So, Attorney Cole, are you referring, or could we maybe use, if we just have common language, then it may help understand. So, what would what might we refer, what would be a good way to refer to this? A rental session, like, my family and I are coming into town and we're going to stay for 7 days, right? Versus over here, 7 different people are staying at this place for the same 7 days, and over here, one group of people is staying for 7 consecutive days. Those are two very different problems.
Yeah, I think you need to view it in terms of discrete stays. That the length of time that
For
a
each-
guest is using.
yes.
It's not a cumulative.
So a
thing.
guest session,
Yep,
like whatever you want to
exactly.
call
Yep.
it, like okay.
Yep. So are you looking at what I emailed you today?
Well, this is what you emailed, although I don't see a red line there. Oh, yeah, I guess it appeared in blue.
Does the whole council have that, or?
No.
So I did bring copies, if you want, I
Okay,
can
that'd be
circulate
good.
them. And, because after, if you could just pass that down to Rick. I apologize for sort of the short, but we were struggling to get this done, to get it on the agenda for today. And after doing that, the mayor pointed out some issues, and Thor had pointed out some issues. So I, this afternoon, cured those. That's what's in this red line here. The intent of this red line was to preserve as much as possible what the council had previously approved, but to bring it, one, into conformity with the statute, and secondly, address some of the practicality issues with the software that we're going to be using.
So as a person in the software industry, you know, we always say your business needs come first, then you design the software to meet what you need it to do. If we're going to use Madison's software,
It's not Madison's.
Oh, it's not, okay.
No.
But the
It's a
same,
commercial
it's a
software.
commercial software, but it's the same software that is being used by the city of Madison. I have a feeling that they have written their ordinances. It's kind of like they're teaching to the test. They've written their ordinances to be in line with the types of reporting that the software can do, as opposed to,
Someone suggested, why aren't we just using Madison? Let's go after
Yeah.
wanting all of our special
That's
things.
sort of where we started out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Just
remember.
Madison.
right,
Yeah,
right.
there were various
And then
amendments
we tried
yeah.
to like be gentler, I know.
But
I
I
know.
think Doug pointed out that more than one or like 3 or 4 communities use 180 days, so we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just,
Right.
and they do it
Madison
pretty
is
strict.
consecutive 180 days.
Yeah.
It's
Those
not
Pittsburgh,
30-day
Waukee,
chunks.
and a lot of other ones.
So in this version, I did remove the 30-day chunks, because
Oh.
the statute is pretty clear. It's
Oh, you
got to
did.
be 180 days, and they get to pick their 180.
Oh,
The only thing we
okay.
get to pick is whether it's consecutive or
Oh,
not.
okay. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
not-
Well, that's
So-
good to know.
Yep. So if you look at 7, the new 7F,
Okay.
if it's for more than 6 and fewer than 30, so it puts it within their protected class. The short-term rental property may be operated for no more than 180 consecutive days in any permit year. The STR operator shall notify the city clerk in writing when the first rental begins.
It's
So that,
consecutive days.
that's,
So it has to be consecutive.
exactly. Well, yes.
I think we need, so if the STR is operated for stays of more than 6, I think the word stay needs to be defined in this document. Because what we're referring to is one rental session. One person's writing the check. One group of people, one individual, one couple, whatever it might be, they all know each other. It's not a revolving door of different people. So
Yep. I can do that.
stays of more than 6, of fewer than, okay.
So you can just make sure I understand. So per the state statute, that's 100 consecutive days?
Right. Well, it's 100, we have to give them 180 days. We can make it consecutive. We don't have to.
Oh, I thought,
But
okay.
if we don't, then we have a much tougher time regulating.
Right.
So looking at this same phrase, what if I were to ask, if the short-term rental is operated for stays of less than 6 days, then what?
So that's all G, H, I, and J. That's what you're
Got
talking
it.
about there, because they're outside of the protected zone. That we can outright ban. So under this version, we're allowing it, but under pretty strict terms. It has to be their primary residence. If it's not their primary, if the residence, they can only do it for 30 days, July 1 to June 30.
It's up in the definition.
Oh, so you did end up keeping that?
Yep, yeah, that's the highlighted portion is the stuff for if they're renting in for stays of less than 6 days or less.
Oh, okay.
In other words, frequent turnover.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that
so-
kind of gets back to the one session per week. That's exactly what, I mean, we're discouraging that. We're discouraging frequent sessions per week.
Gotcha.
Okay, so,
But in fairness, a lot of this stuff this is where we started deviating from Madison's
Madison,
ordinance.
right.
You know.
We were trying to be, yeah.
But what we're saying here is if they are operated for days of 1 to 6 consecutive days, it has to be the owner's primary residence.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
So that precludes people from buying houses and,
right.
Does the owner have to be there at the time of rental?
Yeah, there's another provision down here that says,
It's the next one.
H, yeah, if the owner occupies the residence at the time of the rental, then there is no limit on the number of days.
Mhm.
Good.
but what if they don't? What if they went to visit their kid for 2 weeks?
Then, under the next one, they're limited to 30 days per year of stays.
So we're really encouraging them to be there.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're doing two things. We're discouraging short-term stays, and for any short-term stays there are, we're encouraging the person to be
Be
there
there.
while they're there.
Short-term meaning less than 6 days.
6 days or less.
Yep, yep.
And will there be a definition for multiple unassociated parties?
I believe there is. If you look at section 2.
Oh, there it is, 2A.
A, yep.
And if I can say as well, the 30-day cap for short-term stays, 1 to 6 nights, is exactly the same as Madison as
Yeah.
well.
The multiple unassociated parties was somewhat difficult for me. I was trying to avoid defining vis-à-vis a family unit. You know, so I ended up just saying it's how it is booked.
Right.
It could be friends, girlfriends, you know,
But they all know
relatives.
each, but they all know each other.
They're booked
They're all
together.
associated,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
It's one session, one stay. That's, we have to define that,
Yep.
yeah.
It'll be a single bill.
As a, right.
Yep, yeah. As opposed to separate parties, one stranger gets bedroom 1 and a totally different stranger gets bedroom 2.
Right.
Yeah.
It should be weird, but my brother ended up in one like that in Ohio a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, which he said it was strange.
Airbnb just came out with some big net 30 law, so that would probably take care of that. Anyway,
Oh.
It was
have
all
to worry about
over
that.
the news for the holiday weekend. No parties.
Bill, why would the new why wouldn't they be granted the 180 days?
7I?
Yeah.
Yep.
7I, if the operator is operating an STR pursuant to G, so G is the 1 to 6,
Oh,
and does not occupy, then they only get 30 days.
so if I own my home and I go away for the weekend on Badger football weekend, I can do that a few times, but I cannot exceed
30 days.
30 days in the whole entire year. However, if I do full week rentals, I can have 180 days.
Exactly. And you don't have to stay there. And that's just a function of the statute protecting them.
So the full week rental is to prevent that revolving door. It's like no more than one session a week, right? But yeah.
Yeah, our hands are kind of tied with the longer term rentals. I mean, we're stuck with the statute.
But at least it's not happening all year long. And at least it's not
Well,
multiple.
the longer-term rentals, I'm wondering, like, why is that much of a concern if someone's renting the place for 2-week chunks of time?
Yeah. That would be fine.
Yeah, I think that's why the statute protects them, because it's not a constant turnover. It's
Yeah.
one sort of, non-changing group for at least 2 weeks.
And how are we going to determine if someone is at home at the day of the rental?
Knocking on the door?
Yeah, I mean, we talked it with staff
Chief?
and the mayor about that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of enforcement issues with this. We can put it on the books, but at the end of the day, a lot of this will have to be complaint-driven.
Yeah.
And if we receive a complaint, there's provisions later on, they require them to keep a registry, give us reports. We can look at those documents. We can, have the complaining neighbor testify, that sort of thing. But yes, there would be proof issues on that, without a doubt.
I'm curious to why we would limit to the 30 days for I. Why limit to it at all?
You mean as opposed to let them do it for longer than 30 days?
Yeah.
Well, I think we want to encourage them to occupy the residence while their renter is there during these very short-term stays. That was the logic behind limiting that.
Yeah.
So I guess with respect to that, it would depend on, do you want to incentivize them to be there while their guests are there?
Yeah, so I'm just,
And again, there aren't many people who are in that situation anyway. 1 or 2, maybe, that we know.
Probably one.
Yeah.
that is renting their place when they're not there?
Well, that are living
is
in the
that-
residence and renting.
The opposite. That is there whilst they're renting.
Oh, yeah, and I'm looking at I, which is someone that is not there when they're renting it.
Right, so then they're limited to, they only get 30 days of that. If they're not going to be there when their guest's there, and they're doing short-term stays, they only get 30 days of that, as
Yeah.
opposed to, 180. Or if they stay there, it's unlimited, they get 365.
So hypothetically, someone that owns a home or a nice unit in a nice apartment, and it's not prohibited in their lease, let's just say, and they work for a company that has them traveling, they couldn't rent out their unit for more than a total of the 30 days in the calendar year, unless they were long, for the short stays, the 6 day
Yep.
less.
Yep, that's right.
Is it that if it's more than 30 days, then it falls under other rules about rental
Yep.
properties,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, so
tenancy.
if they're renting for stays longer than 30 days, then it's not a short-term rental. Then it's it would be like renting your home for 6 months. Then it's a tenancy.
So that follows under different
Yep.
ordinance.
But Brian, okay, let's say you're the person, you travel a lot for business, you've got a nice apartment, nobody cares if you rent it out, all right? So you're overseas for a week, someone wants to stay at your house for 2 days, and this happens 10 times in the year. So that's 20 times a year. Okay, so anyway, I'm just thinking, the rental could be rented for a week, even though the person only stays 2 days. There's ways people are going to get around it. I'll book it as a week's stay, but only stay 2 days. That's just, I don't know.
I think sometimes people do that, don't they?
Yeah,
A lot of
they're
places
gonna
are
get
required to
around
do
it,
them, and-
but
Well, and
I
to get
think-
around it, if I were the operator, I would
Yeah.
just say, it's, if you stay less than 6, it's $200 a day. But if you stay more than 6,
Correct.
it's $50 a day.
Exactly what
Yeah.
I'm saying. You price it so that But the good thing about it is that the house your room cannot then be rented to another person during that 6-day period. Because even though the person who's there in person 2 days, on paper they're there for 7 days. So on paper you can't turn it over.
But wouldn't they only have to do that one time in the calendar year?
If they do it just once, then.
It gives them the opening.
Exactly right, yeah.
So then every other stay after that can be a single day.
Can you say that again? I couldn't quite hear.
Yeah, so if I rented for a 7-day chunk to Doug, week 1, every day for the next 173 days, I can rent them each individual days
To a
to
different person,
a different person.
as long as you're there living.
Nope.
No. Because the way the statute's
protected by the
written
180.
Yeah, you just have, exactly right. You just have to punch your ticket once with one long-term stay, then you fall within that sort of protected zone. Yeah.
This must be the B&B industry.
Yeah, I mean, we're preempted with that. I mean, I appreciate the loophole, but yeah, we can't close it because the state is allowing it.
Wow.
Well, this is just ridiculous, isn't it?
I think the good thing is, the part that I
Good
think...
thing it's all recorded, so everybody can figure out how to break the rules.
Maybe we can create a guide.
We are such.
I know.
Aren't we a bunch of buffoons? I mean, you're like, dudes, like, just keep your day job.
I do know for internally, the number one thing was to eliminate that 15 days before they have to get a new permit.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's really a difficult way to enforce it. So if we can get rid of that and update the other
But
stuff.
at the end of the day, 180 days is better than 365, right? You know, so I mean, we don't have perfection, but we have better than what we had before.
And you can be sure if we were to say
Right.
270 or
Right.
something, we'd have the same issue we have now with people wanting
Exactly.
to
You know,
set up here.
So
you know.
suddenly now your enterprise has 50% less, going for it. It's a good thing.
It will be a lot of work, I think, if you're going to do John will have to do ethics reports and figure all that stuff out if they're meeting the guidelines. So there will be a lot of work involved in implementing this ordinance if that's the
Not
route.
consecutive or...
Right, it's not consecutive, it's just 180 days through 365 days.
Yeah, I think just going through the process
That'd
just
be
mentioned.
exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Did you describe for them the fee refund?
Yeah.
Actually, that goes to my next question. So is there a way that you can have different fees for different users? And I'm making the comment regarding, I think it's now aged. The person that is short-term, legitimately short-term, 1 to 6 days, and they're there when the place is being rented. A $750 fee seems...
How do we enforce that, though? How do we, that they're going to be there or not in the course of a whole year?
Well, by us writing it, we're saying. If not, we're saying that they can do it for 30 days.
The other concern with that is, by law, our fees have to be based on what our cost is to oversee the whatever we're regulating. We can't make money on it, nor can we use our fees to manipulate behavior. You know what I mean? So if we could justify that, if we could say, well, these short-term rentals require more oversight from our code enforcement, we could charge more. But somehow we would have to justify that the higher cost is because it costs the city more to somehow regulate those.
And I think it would cost less to regulate the person that's renting it for a night here and there.
I would say that at least initially it seems that there's a lot of startup costs associated with this. The software that would be needed 1 day or 180, the initial inspections as well, sort of from the chief and the building inspector as well. I think that the time sunk into that will be the same, and the standards, as I understand, the standards would be the same, for those inspections for one day or the full 180 or whatever that may be. So ongoing, there may be less calls and, tracking of things, but at least initially out the gates, it would be the same amount of oversight to get.
Is the Madison one really $100?
It's at least in conjunction with the Madison-Dane County Public Health.
Madison has a different cost though, so you might pay for the fee, but then you gotta pay for the inspections, you gotta pay for everything else. So it's not just one fee, there's more fees added on later on, so. There's multiple fees involved.
Do they only have to be inspected once?
Typically, they are inspected each year.
Okay.
That's the requirement.
So that's
Which
part
makes
of the-
sense to me. That's
so
part of the fee.
permit. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So they have to prove that they've had the inspection. Okay.
But the inspection would be the same regardless of if they're a long stay STR or a short stay STR.
So Attorney Cole, is the item in yellow highlight on the, third page in, is that, did I understand you correctly, that is where Monona veers from Madison?
In part, yeah.
Every
there
other
are.
place is very similar, but that's sort of where we
Right.
have.
And this is what regulates 6 days or less, is that right? What's in there?
Correct. So if you wanted to take the strictest approach, you could outright prohibit stays of 1 through 6 days if the council were inclined. The only thing that's protected is 7 days to 30 days. So this allows it, you're less lenient than what you could theoretically be, but you're imposing under these highlighted 4 sections some fairly draconian limitations on them. But you're at least allowing it where you don't have to at all.
Does Madison allow stays of less than 6 days or 7 days?
They do. Couple standards here, and again, just pulling out of the spreadsheet, must be the operator's primary residence. An operator may not be an LLC, trust, nonprofit, and I think that's where they deviate from the city attorney's opinion, and must be the owner of or lessee of the property. So, and again, this is the 30-day standard for City of Madison total, as is proposed here.
So it sounds like it's close to Madison's, but not quite the same.
Yeah.
Are we able to approve this tonight?
No.
No, we're
Just
going
first
to
reading.
bring it back next time. I think we definitely need another kick at the can. But if anybody has more questions or things you want Bill to look at or staff to consider in the meantime, now's the time.
Or sort of like last time too, I mean, in the intervening 2 weeks before the next council meeting, if anybody has, if you want to email them to me, I can incorporate, anything that somebody would like, and then when we bring it back for second reading, we could have that in front of you.
Can you send us a digital copy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Anybody else have anything else they want to ask Bill about this? Okay.
So at this point, then, I'll include a definition of stays, okay? Because I do think it is confusing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'll leave it as red line now unless anybody contacts me.
That's great.
And you're going to send us all the digital?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we'll move on to the next, I guess that's the end of our new business. Move on to reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. Are there any updates on DEI efforts?
We'll be meeting next week.
Thank you, Doug. Anybody else have anything on DEI? Anything on sustainability?
The city's department heads met with Teresa and Rick today to kind of go over the sustainability plan, so.
Yeah. And Rick.
And the mayor is.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So we talked and had a conversation with them, so it was a good meeting. So.
Did you want to say anything else about that, Teresa?
No, not really. I just, I think more will be forthcoming. It's, you know, just to make everyone aware of the reporting that's going on and what might be asked of them and get everyone's buy-in. That was a great meeting. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything on sustainability? We will go to reports about committee reports. So Alder DePula.
Let's see, haven't met yet. So Public Works meets this week, and Parks meets this week. So I don't have any updates in that regard. The county housing committee, we met last week, the mayor and I, and further follow-up conversations regarding the implementation stage of some of these things that we've been talking about. So we'll start discussing that over the course of the next 3 meetings, and then probably recommend some sort of implementation committee. And then also some other creative ways to create affordable housing funds for municipalities, but there's more info coming for that. I just don't have that complete yet. So, but lots of good stuff happening.
Alder Lundquist.
ZBA will be the third Wednesday on the 15th. What? Thursday. Yeah. Third Thursday at 5:30. I believe we have 1 or 2 applicants. 2 applicants for the upcoming meeting. Public safety will be on the 4th Wednesday, which is the 28th, and then that's it.
Tourism met since our last meeting and was able to award some fantastic funding for some really creative events that I'm really looking forward to, just to bring people into Monona, one of them being at San Damiano, and I'm sure Alder Moore will have plenty to say about it, but just a really big event featuring wood carvers from all over the world in honor of Harry Whitehorse, the Native American. I'm sure about a lot of more details will be coming soon
This
after
will be
that.
next year.
Next year, just a really big deal. Let's see, tourism. DIB meets next week, sustainability this week. We'll be just digging into some after-action reviews of citizen-facing campaigns. We've got a Focus on Energy guest that will be appearing to talk about some incentives, some financial incentives to homeowners related to legislation that we'll be learning about. We'll also be just talking about, what do we do beyond, No Mow May, and there's a group of citizens that approached me that was really interested in sort of getting together and talking about some ideas for pollinator gardens and things like that. It's a group of about 20 people so far that have expressed interest. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And then what else do I got? Sustainability. Oh, Landmarks will be meeting also this week. We may not have quorum. We are looking for 2 members.
Yeah.
If anyone in the community is interested, it's fascinating. And if any of you haven't seen the flyers that have been around town, Monona Historic Landmarks, Doug, you had a lot to do with this. This is a beautiful color brochure that just numbers all the sites in the city. It's got a lot of fantastic history. And I think those are my committees.
My turn.
Alder Bernstein.
I went to Eco Tuesday. They had a full crowd for a talk about e-bikes. Very hot topic right now. Lots of interest. They had 2 models people could try. Next month, they're going to go to the sewage plant for a tour.
That's interesting if no one's ever done it.
It is.
Yeah. I went with a school group once. It was fun.
Yeah.
May 31st, I did a training, the Dane County Cities and Village Association. A real strong cast of characters. Steve Steinhoff from CPAC, CISA, CA, Capital Area Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
And
Carpsey.
Copsey, thank you. Carrie Springer from the county exec's office was there, and she highlighted a budget item that she said, I don't know why, but there's an item for bridges here in Monona, and I don't know why either, but I'm sure someone here does. I thought they were probably with Pirate Island or
Yeah, we talked about,
Or is that the lagoon?
Lagoon.
yeah.
Lagoon's doing
Yeah.
a couple of
Okay.
years, I think.
Yeah.
But the highlight for me was Michael Mucha, who's the chief engineer and director at the MMSD, Madison Metropolitan Sewage District. He talked about PFAS, and he said that there's probably more in our bodies already than we
Scary.
could save by, getting it out of the water system. But he also talked about pharmaceuticals and how that's also in the wastewater. Not because people are dumping it down the toilet if unused, but it's the used chemicals that run through our bodies. And it's very expensive to remove, and that could be, it's unfeasible to build another plant. So his focus is on public health and trying to get people to use, most of the chemicals are related to stress, high blood pressure, and anxiety. So it's more a public health issue in more ways than one. He also mentioned that there's an initiative that Madison has started that they provide reduced rates on water for those in need based on their income. It might be something we want to think about investigating for ourselves. It's one way to make living in Monona more affordable rather than building housing specifically for a class of people. There's other ways to make it more affordable.
You'd have to do it through the PSC to do it.
Did they have to do that?
I'm assuming they would have to. So we-
Okay.
Yeah, regulated that way.
Okay.
Sewer rates.
Not sewer rates.
Water rates.
Water rates.
Oh, well, that's one thing that came up too, is that at a separate meeting at the Municipal League of Municipalities, they mentioned that stormwater rates are not regulated. Okay. So that was something I didn't know. And they also mentioned wheel taxes, which is a great way to raise money locally for transportation. And when I looked at the numbers, there's over 6,000 cars in Monona. So if we did $20 wheel tax, it could be $125,000. Just
We've talked about that.
Yep.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit, what's the word?
Regressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for.
June 8th will be my first Sustainability Committee meeting with Teresa. And June 20th, we've already canceled the library board meeting. No one's going to be in town. Everyone's going up north or vacationing. But I wondered, now that we know it's being canceled, is there a way to put that on the website?
That the library board meeting is being canceled?
Any public
Ryan
meeting.
should put that on the website. It
Okay.
should be on the calendar.
That the meeting is not
Right.
scheduled.
Typically, we do put that they're canceled on the calendar on the website.
Who makes that happen?
It's usually the staffer, isn't it? Mark or?
Usually a staff person or me.
Yeah.
So like Ryan should do that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my report. Thank
Okay.
you.
Doug, did you have anything to report? Chief? I'm sure you have something to report.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure Doug didn't have anything else. Well, thank you. Very wonderful conversation to listen in on some of the policy changes that are happening. And as you all were doing that, I spent my time researching short-term rentals in Monona, looking at a cheerful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I love that description.
All right.
Goes to public safety too. So, especially the costs that they're charging.
What were they charging?
That one was $450 a night.
Huh. Dang.
So that's what I said. So a couple of thank yous, very important thank yous. The chief had to leave, fire chief had to leave, but on behalf of both of us, just thank you for Memorial Day. Thank you for those who attended, those who participated, the organizer, the wonderful crowd that was there. It was a safe event. So thanks to all of you and to those who attended. 99.9%, I said this earlier in staff, 99.9% folks were very appreciative. Great feedback from both Madison residents who attended I'm an owner resident, and so that's always good to hear.
By the way, Chief, excellent job on the security plan.
I
Thank
was
you.
just
Yeah.
going to say, why are
Thank
you
you
thanking
for all the hard
us?
work and
Seriously.
the work that went into that. Thank you for
Yeah,
taking that on us.
it went off without a hitch.
I appreciate that.
Great.
Thank you. The goal is safety, so thank you.
Yeah.
And it's great when security experts are doing what they're trained to do. Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Thank you. Staff was recently invited to attend and participate in being a part of the reunification center. So that concept of having reunification centers for mass casualty incidents or disasters, etc. Your police, your fire, and your public works are likely going to be taxed during any significant event in town, heaven forbid. So instead, we thought best, perhaps the other staff can step up and help provide support. Any of you who are interested in lending a hand in that capacity, learning more about it, attending a training, I think it's a 2 or 3 hour training that's going to be held the first couple days in August. You attend the second one. The first one's primarily for school. The second one, which is on August 2nd, is for everyone else, including myself. Several staff are planning to attend, so if any of you all are interested, please let me know, and I'll get you the details. That would be very much appreciated. So you'll learn what a reunification center is, how to set it up, and once we get our new city administrator on board, who is the emergency manager for the city, we'll make sure he's involved as well and approves the plan. So, just some housekeeping in-house. 2 officers announced their retirement. I didn't already share that with the council within a span of a week from one another. So we have 2 retirement eligible officers who put in their notice. One took advantage of the 1% incentive that you all approved as part of the association contract. So thank you. That helps both us out and it helps the officer do some planning as well. So one officer was leaving in November and the other in August. We are in week 2 for Carter Losby for his field training as a full-time officer. One officer is going to be deployed. I think I mentioned that. She'll be on military deployment. Actually, her deployment ceremony is this Saturday, so several of us are attending that. So she's transitioning with that. And then finally, just a thank you to round out my thank yous. I said this last year as well. Number one, this is my 2-year anniversary. So how
Only 2
fortunate am I
years?
to be here.
Yeah.
But
It seems like so
I'm
much
even,
longer.
Well, it doesn't to me. It feels like yesterday.
I mean, it just feels like you've been here, part of our community
Thank you.
forever. It just
Thank you.
feels
Well,
like
it's
you're
because you've made me feel so
Jeez,
welcome. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. But you know, every time this year when you formally recognize things such as Pride, Juneteenth, obviously as a gay black man and somebody who works for you, that says a lot. So it's not only your words, but it's your actions. You actually talk the talk. So thanks for that. Certainly, people like me are listening and paying attention, and hopefully we'll be able to attract more high qualified employees here to work for the city. So with that, just questions? Anything else?
Anybody get any awards today?
Yeah.
I was surprised by one today, and thank you for those of you who showed up to this surprise.
What?
One of the officers who, veterans or current service members, one in the reserve, unbeknownst to me, nominated me for an award from the Department of Defense in support of National Guard members and reservists. And a very, very nice and touching award. And so a gentleman representing the part of the government that really promotes support for Guards members and reservists was here to present an award to me, which is really cool, and to the department, which means all of you, which is really cool, in supporting hiring and supporting reservists and National Guardspersons. So very, very cool. I don't never thought in my wildest dreams I'd get recognized from the Department of Defense doing anything. Trying to save my little old hole here in this part of the world. But very, very cool for somebody. And I mentioned during the event today that, I had an earlier dream of wanting to join the Air Force and be a part of the Air Force and get into the academy, which was silly enough and didn't make the grades. So here I am. So it was very, very kind and thoughtful. And it just goes to show that, yeah, there are some sacrifices that we as a municipality, especially with a small department, we make when we hire reservists or persons who are in the National Guard. But these folks are out making sure that we enjoy the very freedoms that we have today. So I think they pay in way more than we get out of them. So whatever we can do to continue to encourage fostering that type of environment here, I wholeheartedly support. So thank you, Alder, for embarrassing me.
And I understand Alder DePula got that award.
He did, yes.
Yep. Yeah.
There's 2 members.
As an employer, yeah.
Wow.
We said we're going to put a plaque in the hallway. Like all the mayors in the county. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Cole, did you have any news?
I don't. I have a question as to why the chief is not wearing authorized headgear.
I know. It's one of those days.
Bigger hat.
I have no report.
Aline, do you have anything?
No.
Just one thing, I don't know, Bryce, if you were going to touch on. We're hoping not to have the July 3rd meeting, which is the day before, would be Monday, which the city is open, so we're hoping to cancel that. But the next meeting, the 19th, we for sure have 2 people who are not going to be here, so we want to make sure we have a quorum. So if you just check the 19th and make sure, just let us know if you can't make it so we know if there's a quorum issue that day.
It's my understanding is neither of them can access the meeting via Zoom, so.
Correct. So.
And
July 17th.
We can zoom in too, right?
Correct, that's considered, yeah.
You mean 17th? 17th?
The 19th, isn't it?
It's 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today, is that?
Oh, I thought you meant.
You thought you were
Oh,
gonna be on
19th of
Sunday?
June.
No, I thought you meant
Oh, I thought you said July.
July.
Did I say July, is it June?
Rick, you were going to.
Yeah, right. I was going to add.
Yeah, June 19th.
The 19th.
Sorry.
The 19th is also
Okay,
June.
I'm one of the 2 people not going to be.
Yeah, and Nancy's the other one, and she's in Portugal.
So we just need to make sure we have the 4, otherwise we don't have a quorum.
I just had a couple things. We just, so you know, we are going to be changing somewhat the way the agendas are set up, because right now it's been a little confusing. At the very top, it says, I can't remember what it says, like this is it gives the impression that the meeting, at times, that it's a Zoom meeting, and it really isn't. The deal is usually that there's a Zoom option, but we prefer to have people attending in person. And sometimes there's meetings that people come to via Zoom, and they really need to be in person, but they don't know that they should be. So Leah's working on kind of rewording a little bit of that and getting it out to staff. And I think pretty much the way today's agenda is the way that's going to be going forward. The June 19th thing, I think. Oh, and the only other thing is Mark and I have started meeting on the budget already. And he's going to be sending capital budget instructions out to staff tomorrow. So we'll start, we'd like to have it on two committee agendas if possible, and it's due in August, is that right? And then we'll follow that with operating once we have a clue what the legislature's
So
doing.
that might be a little bit delayed until we know what's going on with that 6 year.
The operating, right?
The budget might drag on for quite some time.
Oh, it's 6 months. You guys aren't, well,
You're
you
talking
are.
about
I'm talking
Oh, the
state.
state budget, yeah.
Yeah, we might not get any clarity on that for a long time.
They may have the shared revenue, which they're treating as a separate bill.
Okay.
That may be settled fairly
And they're
soon.
technically supposed to be done June 30th.
Yeah,
Making
but-
the whole-
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're supposed to be.
But we're hoping to have the shared revenue, and I think they're conscious of the fact that everybody's starting their planning and need to know what's happening there, so. And we should have an announcement about this. We'll be notifying you about the city administrator in the next few days. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Very good. Other than that, there are no appointments, I think. And so is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.